Hello there everyone, welcome back. We have managed to round out all the matchups, even if the Tau one may have been a little anticlimactic and a little bit one-sided, I'm afraid to admit. But we're gonna mix it up by going back to Orks apparently, which, quite frankly, is the race I've been playing against the most, it seems like, in this championship match. Cause hell, I had like, what, 4 against the Satos alone, on top of maybe 2 or 3 other Orks I played up against. So I think it's safe to say I have some really good experience in this. Although, I will admit, it always feels like a leap of fate a little bit when I do a cruiser clash against Orks, especially when I'm not deciding to field a Widowmaker for this matchup, considering that Orks would kind of need to get in close. You would think anyway. At least that's the thought process anyway. I go with my 2 Overlords, my Retribution, and a Dauntless there with the Imperial Navy favor, and that's going to basically serve as like my scouting vessel for when the Orks finally get close enough that I can reveal or deploy a Cobra, so that way it can do some spying for me, considering the Orks' inability to actually solid run. Unless they happen to have Novacans, which I have been encountering a few of them. Hell, the warm-up match I actually did before this game on persistent mode actually ended up being an Ork, and crazily enough, they decided to field 5 whopping Novacans. And then, to deter me from charging his cruisers, all the light cruisers he had like 12 savages to try and scare me off there. It was interesting, sure as hell terrifying when I found out about the Novacans the first time. Because after all, only way I'm going to know about the blood axes, I believe they are, is when they're shooting a bunch of Novacans on me, and it's not, it's a very shocking sight, needless to say. Even if my fleet's very well equipped to deal with that, it was still a little bit terrifying. I won't lie. So, nonetheless, I talked about my Overlords, my Retributions, and I'm basically going to do what I've been doing before here. I'm just going to boost whenever needed to dodge the torpedo salvos that he's sending my way. At least to force him to do a wider spread, which in turn will make it a lot more easier for me to take the torpedoes head on, because I won't be at risk of like getting hit by multiple torpedoes in what he's doing right now with the boarding torpedoes. He has them kind of like in a really tight arc, which is kind of similar to how I'm firing my torpedoes. I just boost until I'm clear, ideally clear, fire another salvo with as tight a spread as possible, especially with the Orks' lack of high energy turn and mobility, and boost again. Although, I'm starting to realize with this strategy, it makes it incredibly difficult to move forward there. Although that's more the torpedoes rather than me trying to be fancy here and dodge the torpedoes, because I like to keep, I'll kind of need to keep as much distance as I can so I have as much time to dodge the torpedoes. But in the end, it's not giving me the position I would like, because actually that structure right up there to the left would actually be really damn good right now to kind of use as a wall a little bit if he's going to do any aggressive play. Kind of force him to use a micro warp jump if he wants to get around it. At least that would be the idea. Hell, and I've been talking before how I like to use the asteroid belts kind of like as a deterrent and shield for the Orks as well. But apparently, against the Satos in the last match, apparently I'm wrong about the shields being the source of the being protected by the asteroids. It's actually something Orks get completely with their Gork-blessed pilots, I guess. Because apparently, once they get that upgrade, it doesn't matter if they have shields down or not, they get complete immunity to asteroids. So, that was something I was completely oblivious to. I kind of figured they were like the other factions, or at least like Imperial Navy, where they require their shields being up in order to actually be immune to the asteroid belts. So, a bit of a learning experience there, and apparently my strategy against the Satos was a flawed one, because I was actually giving him additional defenses because he was in said asteroid belt. So, we find out about the Novacan, we find out about the shock attack, which fails horribly here. So, we're looking good. Nothing to really worry about besides these torpedoes. And he is firing a lot of boarding torpedoes, I will say. He's firing like almost entirely boarding torpedoes. As I finally reveal the Cobra, I'm not gonna boost it just yet. I'm just basically gonna send it forward to get ready to start revealing these ships, and maybe if possible, take a torpedo or two. And of course, the silent running obviously is to help avoid getting shot by a Nova cannon. At least that's the plan anyway, although it's kind of a good thing if it takes a Nova cannon shot, because, well, who am I kidding? It's only a single Nova cannon. If there was like 2, maybe 3 of them, then I might be worried a bit. Because then he can take down my shields and potentially break through the hull. But as it stands now, with 1 Nova cannon, this Cobra, I'd rather keep it alive so it can spot for me. As now, we start revealing his battlecruiser, his battleship, and what else has he got? Yep. 2 battlecruisers, a battleship. This is the heavy hitters. He is going all out with this fleet. And especially with all the favors he has, because I don't know if you noticed it or not, but he also got the Goff clan favor on that battleship there. So, he's going really damn top heavy, so I don't need to tell you how valuable this fleet will be to kill. Hell, I don't even supercharge Void Shield because it is a single Nova cannon. Even if I were to take that dead center on, it wouldn't even get through the hull at all. So I let it go, and thankfully, the Frost Pattern shield's actually negated entirely, so that wasn't even planned. That wasn't even planned as I dodge torpedoes again, dodge stasis bomb, and, ideally, try and chip down his fleet as much as I can, because a confrontation is inevitable. Confrontation is inevitable, but thankfully there... I had a point there, I completely forgot about it. Oh well, either way, I'm chipping him down nicely there. Even the death deal is getting close to half health. I do start taking torpedoes, and it is a painful one because I didn't turn my prow in time. I was more focused on doing damage with the lances to try and chip away that hammer. But still, the charge is inevitable. And these things are going to get a little bit crippled, so if they're nicely softened up, at least those 2 ships. I have no idea about the other ones just yet, but I prepare myself for the eventual charge. I turn my prow forward, I get my final torpedoes ready, and ideally try and do as much damage as I can, as apparently he starts to do his micro warp jump, so I don't think these torpedoes are going to do as much as I would like. Yeah, it's safe to say torpedoes aren't going to hit unless that hammer in front doesn't micro warp jump in time. I don't think it activated. The battleship sure as hell did, but the prow is facing his fleet, and that's going to help negate a lot of the charge damage, the ramming damage at least. Although, with the Goff clan and all the boarding actions he has available to him, this is still going to be scary as hell. It's going to be scary as hell as I activate the supercharged Void Shield here. Accidentally recharge the capacitor as well in the frantic panic, but we managed to make it through the Death Dealer. Is he going to ram his own ship? Nope. They just skirt on by. We're going to be a Matador for this time being, because we are going to completely avoid that battleship and just wreck everything else. I got power rams, I got a lot of firepower, and his fleet is now separated, so I'm going to have a field day with these ships in back that he's been trying to hide with. So, this shock attack, this Bad Moon cruiser, or hammer, is about to go down. A couple more hits, and it's going to die, but not until it gets one final ram in, and what ramming it does, it only does light damage to my battleship at least, but first cruiser's down, and we're about to do a massive amount of damage onto the rear of this hammer, but not without my overlord taking a crap ton of damage, and I decide to let it go. I need a live for this best of 3, and sadly, it does get heavily damaged at the last possible second. Although, if I win this match, then it's going to be back for the Cruiser Clash for the final round, and if anything, I'm feeling confident in my Cruiser Clash matchup against Orks. It's just scary as hell when you see the loadout he's feeling here. Favors on almost all his battle cruisers, all his ships rather, and we have to deal with a death deal that only has one thing on the brain, and that's charging me to death. But damn, do those torpedoes ever feel good when you hit them with every single one of them. We just took out half of that hammer's health in an instant, and it felt damn good. So, the cruiser's gone, the first hammer is gone. This death deal is so close to heavily damaged, we just gotta avoid and mitigate as much of this ram damage as possible. But with both my engines down on these 2 ships, It's scary. And holy crap, were those serious? I thought those were boarding torpedoes. They look like boarding torpedoes. I'm completely wrong. And it hurt. Those hurt like hell. Although I tried to warp out the second Overlord and it actually got board canceled, which actually might be a good thing given the circumstances, because it denies one of his boarding actions, actually crippling my ship, especially if he were to get a hull breach or something. So that may have actually been a blessing in disguise a little bit. Denying a potential weapon destruction or hull breach. Hull breach is kind of what I'm afraid of the most there, because that would be another ship that would be heavily damaged. But thankfully, with the battleship now gone, we won the first round. And I won't lie, that was still scary as hell. I was terrified about that battleship, even though the favor doesn't really do a whole lot, aside from maybe the extra boardings, which... And he also wogged, actually, come to think of it. So that's 6 boarding assaults he has on my ship, which basically killed my engines with the retribution at the start there. So it is still terrifying. Thankfully, the prow did its job. I don't know if my brace for impact timing was the best there, but on top of that, with the prow, I'm basically negating almost all the ram damage he could be doing for me. The real problem is when he starts ramming my side, that's when it starts to hurt like hell, as made apparent when he finally got the side of the retribution there with the battleship. It was painful, I won't lie. But we came out of that a victor, no ships were lost, and we're going to have our Overlord there back for round 3, should it drag on this match. But he lost almost everything, everything rather of note, because after all, favor on the battleship, favor on at least one of the hammers because he had a Nova Cannon shock attack, so that was a lot of renown he just burnt. A lot of renown he just lost, and now all he has left is 2 cruisers and a bunch of Bashas. So he doesn't have that heavy hitting fleet as he needs anymore, so I think I'm in prime position just win it right here. As interestingly enough, for some reason, he actually decides to let me be the defender in a space station assault. Which makes me wonder if he just can see it right here a little bit, because that is a little unorthodox, a little unusual. Unless he somehow feels like he can win with a bunch of heavy cannons or mega cannons. I'm not honestly sure the thought process here. But considering I did destroy all his backbone, I'm in good shape here. The only downside, which leads me to a really weird type of fleet setup, since I don't have my second Overlord in here, I decide to skip out on the Widowmakers entirely and do a Retribution, Dictator, and Overlord fleet instead. It's something a little bit different. Something I don't know if I really like, to be perfectly honest, but it's a lot of power. And that's something that Orks can respect, right? It's lots of massive power. And with the Retribution, he's going to get it there. And actually get more torpedoes as a result, I think. Because I don't really use the Widowmakers for their torpedo potential. Which is, I guess, is kind of obvious, because the Widowmakers are the best damn scouting ships in the game. I want to seriously argue they're potentially overpowered. I seriously wonder about that. Or maybe it's because, I don't know, really. Because if I weren't using the Widowmaker, how much would that drastically affect my matches as Imperial Navy? Because I could easily swap out some of the capacitor recharges here. Because I don't think I've been getting the best value out of them because I've been using the shield recharge or the transfers so frequently. More so than the recharge itself. So I seriously wonder if scrapping the Widowmakers is that significant as I'm making it out to be. Because I feel like they're the bread and butter to my composition. But I can easily fix that slightly with, like I said, removing some of the shield the capacitor recharge for some beacons. And of course the Dauntlesses themselves could afford to have an extra beacon as well. And I already got one Dauntless to have access to a Cobra reinforcement, so that can also serve as a scout. Especially since I would have additional renown should the Widowmaker not exist or be scrapped, to kind of give that extended sensors, which with the 7,500 sensor range to deploy my Cobra already, I basically got a potential 1,500 sensor range when I spawn the Cobra. So that's going to be potentially even better scouting potential. It's just a little more fragile because the Cobra is going to be isolating, easy to snipe, especially against Chaos of all things, and they're the ones who need detection the most if they're going to rely on their lance strategy. Nonetheless, the bashes are coming in, they're taking a lot of hammering, and of course I'm not really terrified of these torpedoes at all. I keep a tight formation, get as much out of the point defense as I possibly can, and hopefully try to weather the storm best of my ability, and then just treat whatever takes heavy damage, like that Overlord down below. It took, what, 2 torpedoes already early on. So I pull it back, I repair it, and just get it into a better position to try and protect it from additional hits, ideally. Because the repair itself is going to get rid of all that damage without an issue. I just don't want to take repeated hits. Ideally. Although I don't really move that much, I mostly just put it behind my dictator and try and make it a little bit closer, just so it's a little more likely to point defensive support in it, but we're doing good. Only the dictator got hit that time. As really, we continue the torpedo salvo, we continue the onslaught, and really, he's just pinned himself against this minefield, quite frankly. Because there's only one way through that mine unless he wants to dive into the mines themselves, which would kind of give away the fact he's kind of conceited, I would think, because he can dodge those easily enough, right? You would think. He is a bit hesitating, though, a little bit, as he tries to get more torpedoes off, but...
Yes, Admiral.
And as I talk about that mine there, he flies right into it. 100 damage on the cruiser. The Basha took a massive beating, the one in the middle there. I will say that was a successful torpedoes run. That's what happens, I guess, when you don't have fighters to protect yourself. It is brutal, needless to say. As I unload on that cruiser, try and maximize the damage even though it does have the brace for impact, and we charge on in. It was a damn good hit, even if he soared most of it, but with the fires, the broadside, and the retribution, it's instantly gone. Instantly gone, of course, with power rams. You know what I'm going to do with this dictator. I'm just going to throw around his bashes a bit, bully him around, throw him off course, and have the Overlord just clean up the mess. As I actually turn the retribution around, because I'm kind of concerned he might do some weird dive onto the station. Which isn't too terrible considering he has no mega cannons. He's all torpedoes in this sense, so not as justified as it thought it would be. But nonetheless, these armor-piercing rounds and damn good side shots are showing their worth in this matchup, in this battle. As interestingly enough, I fire Meltas, just to light everything on fire. It is 25 armor, so it is definitely worthwhile, even though these things are going to die well before the fires even get to do their damage, quite frankly. So, it was another stomp. But damn, that first match was scary as hell. It could have gone down to anything, really, in that factor. If I dodged one of those rams, I would have been in so much better shape. If I took one hit on the side earlier, that would have meant my ships would have died that much quicker, because we saw how quickly the Overlords were getting crippled after all. So that was scary as hell. We weathered the storm, despite all that, and we're in good damn shape. And it only lasted 3 minutes, which is kind of why I thought he kind of conceded there a little bit. So another short match, but another nice stomp. And I feel like Cruiser Clash potentially is the way to go against Orks, so long as I'm playing smart and not reckless.